I was sure that fate favored me. I didn't have to reach for the stars, but life was going more or less successfully. By the age of 24, I had a pretty good job. I was a tennis instructor. I had loved this sport since childhood, and now I could do it all the time, while also getting paid for it. Not everyone is lucky enough to do what they love for a living, so I appreciated my job. However, the salary was quite modest, and with such earnings, I would never have saved enough to buy my own place. But luck was on my side again. A distant great-aunt, who had no close relatives besides our family, left me an apartment as an inheritance. Just like that, out of nowhere. Although I suspected that her relatives had asked her to do it. Her only son had become an alcoholic and died before even reaching the apartment. He fell down the stairs in a drunken stupor and broke his neck. I was sure that fate favored me. I didn't have to reach for the stars, but life was going more or less successfully. By the age of 24, I had a pretty good job. Since then, Grandma Natasha had been helped by my mom and grandmother. I rarely saw her and didn't take part in any of it, so I was surprised to learn that the apartment had been signed over to me. I moved into an old house on Chekhov Street. Worn-out wallpaper, an old creaky bed, but I settled in anyway. Gradually, I made repairs, bought furniture, and got used to my bachelor lifestyle. Then I started paying attention to people and found out that an interesting girl lived in the neighboring entrance. Pretty, yes, very much so. Or maybe she was just my type. I immediately liked her dark chestnut hair, expressive eyes, and slightly parted lips. She dressed simply, oversized t-shirts, light jeans, and white sneakers. She seemed quiet and a bit timid. There was something cozy about her, and I liked that. Right away, I wanted her to notice me too. I couldn't help but show off a little when passing by her, throwing my tennis racket over my shoulder, trying to look serious, absent-mindedly running my fingers through my hair. And then, I got my chance to be a gentleman. She was coming home with a large box from a pickup point, and I rushed over to help her with the door. "Thank you," she said, looking me in the eyes. Now I had a reason to say hello to her. She seemed interested too, but I didn't want to come off as pushy or scare her away. I thought, let things unfold naturally. One day, on my way home from work, I ran into her in the courtyard. "Hi," I said with a smile. "Hi," she replied and asked. One day, on my way home from work, I ran into her in the courtyard. "Hi," I said with a smile. "Hi," she replied and asked.
"Do you have a racket in your case?"
Although it seemed pretty obvious. "No, it's a weapon," I replied, putting on a serious face. "Actually, I'm a hitman." She smirked, and her eyes sparkled. That's how we started talking. I found out her name was Christina. She was a year and a half younger than me, and she was in her final year of law school. Christina rented an apartment and lived alone, just like I did. We had similar interests, we liked the same shows, the same food, and other little things. I invited her to play tennis. And even though she wasn't very good, constantly dropping the racket, missing shots, and losing sight of the ball because of her poor eyesight, it was clear she was having fun. "If everyone had your persistence, I'd be out of a job," I said, trying to cheer her up.
"Don't flatter me,"
she exclaimed, hitting the ball off to the side. "I used to be clumsy too," I replied. "But if you do something you love every day, you can't help but get better." After a couple of hours on the court, our relationship started to develop rapidly. We spent every evening together, walking, watching movies. Christina visited me, and I went to hers. One day, I suggested we go to the cinema. It had been a while since I'd been, but I remembered enjoying it before. We met outside her building, as planned. "Hey," I said, hugging her. "Ready?" She took my arm, and we began walking, planning to stroll to the shopping center. But suddenly, she stopped abruptly and pulled me in the opposite direction. I was surprised. "What's going on?" I asked.
Let's just go a different way.
She replied, tightening her grip on my arm.
We're not late, are we?
I silently agreed, but as I glanced back, I noticed a strange person standing on the other side where we were heading. His face was horrific, grotesque, his bald, shiny head, eyes huge like a fly's, and his mouth was so wide it looked like it had been torn from ear to ear. I said, "Who was that person standing there? Do you know him?"
Who are you talking about?
She asked quietly, not understanding what I was talking about. "The guy who was standing there. You didn't see him?"
No, there was no guy there.
She said with a look of complete confusion. Her words sounded like nonsense, but I clearly remembered seeing him. It wasn't just a coincidence. I insisted. "Are you messing with me? You're wearing glasses, you should have noticed that strange guy."
Well, there was someone, bald and scary. I got scared, didn't want to run into trouble, so we left.
Christina replied, nervously pulling her hand away. "But who was he? Why was he so scary?"
I don't know. Just some guy. Maybe a thug or a homeless person.
I felt that something was off, but she didn't want to continue the conversation. We continued our walk to the shopping center in awkward silence. But something told me he wasn't just a random passerby. From that day on, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching us. In the evening, we met at my apartment, but the atmosphere was tense. Christina spoke little, as if she were hiding something. She silently listened to me when I shared my fear about that strange person, and then she said,
Ilya, let's not talk about this.
"You know something," I guessed.
Yes, I know. It's the bloody face. He kills people. But you can't talk about him, or there will be more victims.
A chill ran down my spine. Christina explained that this creature appears every few years and then disappears. "Just wait it out," she said. Since then, our relationship became cold. Christina started avoiding me, and I buried myself in work. But one morning, I ran into that man again. He was standing on the garage roof, his eyes bulging, and red slime was dripping from his mouth. That's when Christina called me and suggested we meet. We spent the evening together, but I couldn't shake the thoughts of bloody face. She seemed nervous too, but didn't say a word about it. Then, that night, when I returned home, something horrible happened. A woman in our building, a kind and quiet neighbor, was murdered. She was killed with a sharp object, and the door to her apartment was wide open. The next day, I saw the familiar scene, blood and slime on the porch. I realized that bloody face hadn't left. He was here again. Then, a murder happened in our building. My suspicions about the terrifying man were not unfounded. But Christina asked me to stay silent, and I promised her I would. The next morning, I woke up with a strange feeling of unease. The apartment was quiet, but the silence felt somehow foreign. The man I had encountered before, bloody face, was now much closer. He was becoming a part of our world. I couldn't think of anything else. Christina, as always, was silent, as if she knew something. Her anxiety was increasingly seeping through her behavior. She called me and suggested we meet. We met in that same place, by the old house on Chekhov Street, where it all began. Bit by bit, she told me more. It wasn't just a monster. It wasn't just a killer. It was a curse, an entity that haunted those connected to it in some way. It could take the form of people, be nearby and silent, and then kill. But there was something else behind it. The power of this creature left no trace, it simply took a life and disappeared. We can't escape this, Christina said. I realized that we had become part of this game. At that moment, I decided I could no longer just stand by. We began searching for a way out. But there was no way out. More and more bloodstains led us to the city's underground chambers, ancient halls I didn't even know existed. And then, as we stood at the final crossroads, just before entering the black door, I realized we couldn't go back. This place was tied to him. Our life began here, and it was here it had to end. In the darkness, I saw his face again. And I knew I couldn't escape this shadow.